You have been told a lie your entire life. You have been told it so many times and from so many different directions that you no longer even question it. Every institution you have ever trusted, every teacher you have ever listened to, every authority you have ever obeyed, has repeated this same lie until it became the very ground upon which you stand. And the lie is this, that the world outside of you is the real world, that the chair you sit in, the walls around you, the body you inhabit, the bills on your table, the diagnosis from your doctor, the balance in your bank account, that these hard, physical, undeniable facts are the primary reality. And that you, the awareness hearing these words right now, you are secondary, you are a product. You are a side effect of matter bumping into matter across billions of years until, by some cosmic accident, consciousness flickered into existence like a candle in an empty room. That is the lie, and tonight I am going to show you why everything you have built your life upon is upside down, backwards, and precisely inverted from the truth. Consciousness is not a product of the world. The world is a product of consciousness. You do not live in a world. You live in a consciousness that projects a world. And when you truly understand this, not as philosophy, not as poetry, not as some comforting spiritual notion to be discussed over tea and forgotten by morning, but as literal, operative, testable fact, you will hold in your hands the key to every door that has ever appeared locked to you. The state you occupy determines the world you see. This is not theory. This is not hope. This is the fundamental architecture of existence itself, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Once you know it, you cannot unknow it. And nothing, I tell you, nothing in your outer world will ever hold the same authority over you again. Now, I want you to understand clearly what I am promising you tonight, because I do not make promises lightly, and I do not traffic in vague spiritual comfort. I am going to take you into the deepest foundation of everything I teach, everything I have ever taught, everything I have lived and proven and demonstrated in my own experience across decades of testing this principle against every conceivable human circumstance. And that foundation is this single proposition: consciousness is the only reality, not one reality among many, not the most important reality, not the highest reality on some spiritual hierarchy, the only reality. Every object, every person, every circumstance, every condition you have ever encountered in what you call the outer world is nothing more and nothing less than a crystallization of assumption within your own consciousness. This is the teaching I brought from Barbados to New York, from small lecture halls to the great stages of the city, and it has not changed because truth does not change. It does not update itself. It does not evolve with the fashions. The fashions of the world change. The theories of science change. The opinions of men change with every generation, but the law by which consciousness becomes fact, this has never changed, and it never will. I tell you from my own experience, every transformation I have ever undergone, every impossible thing I have ever accomplished, every door that opened when every rational mind told me it was sealed shut forever, all of it, without exception, began in consciousness and crystallized into form. And what I did, you can do. What I discovered, you can discover, not because I am special, not because I possess some gift that was denied to you, but because the law is universal. It operates for every being who wears a human body, whether that being knows it or not. And tonight, I am going to show you not only that this is true, but exactly how it works, exactly why it works, and exactly how you can begin to use it before your head touches the pillow this very evening. Let us begin where all things begin, which is consciousness itself. I do not mean the brain. I do not mean the nervous system. I do not mean the electrical impulses firing between synapses that your scientists have so diligently catalogued and measured. These are effects. These are shadows on the wall of the cave, to borrow the image from Plato. I mean the simple, irreducible fact of awareness. You are aware right now. You are aware of my words. You are aware of the room around you, or the car you are sitting in, or the darkness behind your closed eyes. That awareness, that I am, that fundamental sense of being, is not something the brain creates. It is something the brain exists within. Consider this carefully. Take away every object in creation. Take away every star, every atom, every particle of matter. Remove the entirety of physical creation down to the last subatomic speck. And what remains? Awareness remains. You remain. That formless, featureless, unconditioned sense of I am that does not depend on any object for its existence, that is the reality behind all realities, the cause behind all causes, the source from which every world is born and into which every world returns. Now I want you to hear this carefully, because your rational mind will resist it with everything it has. Your rational mind has been trained, conditioned, educated to believe that consciousness is produced by matter, that the brain secretes thought the way the liver secretes bile, the way the stomach secretes acid. But I tell you that the opposite is true. Matter is produced by consciousness. The entire physical world, in all its apparent solidity and permanence, is an outpicturing of states held within awareness. Your body is not the container of consciousness. Consciousness is the container of your body, your world, your circumstances, your relationships, your health, your wealth, everything you have ever called real. This is not metaphor. This is not poetic language designed to inspire you. When I say you are imagination, and imagination creates reality, I mean it in the most literal sense available to human language. Imagination, which is awareness in its creative function, is the operant power of all creation. It is not one power among many. It is the only power. And every apparent power you see in the outside world, whether it appears as government, as money, as medicine, as physics, as luck, as fate, as chance, is nothing more than imagination crystallized into a form you have forgotten you created. The world is your consciousness pushed out, hardened into shape by the assumptions you hold so steadily and so habitually that you no longer notice you are holding them. A fish does not notice the water in which it swims. And you, until tonight, have not noticed the consciousness in which you swim, but tonight you will begin to notice. And once you notice, you will begin to direct. And once you direct, friend, the entire game changes in ways you cannot yet foresee. Now, before I take you deeper, and I am going to take you much deeper than most are willing to go, I want to pause and tell you something important. What I have just said may sound radical. It may sound impossible. It may sound like the ravings of a mystic who has lost his grip on the hard facts of life. And I understand that response because I once shared it. There was a time when I too believed the world was fixed, solid, external, and utterly indifferent to my inner states. There was a time when I believed I was a victim of circumstance, a small creature tossed about by forces too large and too indifferent to care about my desires. But that time ended. It ended not because I read a convincing argument, not because someone talked me out of my old beliefs, but because I tested the principle I am sharing with you tonight, and it proved itself in hard, undeniable, physical fact. It proved itself not once but 100 times, not in small things only but in matters of life and death, of freedom and imprisonment, of poverty and abundance. And so I am not asking you to believe me on faith. I am asking you to test me. Test this principle against the evidence of your own life and let the results do the convincing that no words ever could. Because what I am about to share with you next will show you exactly how consciousness moves from invisible assumption to visible, touchable, undeniable fact. The bridge between consciousness and the physical world is assumption. This is the mechanism. This is the law in its operative form. This is the secret hidden in plain sight that the world has overlooked for centuries. Whatever you assume to be true, whatever you accept as a fact about yourself and your world must eventually confirm. Not because the world is kind, not because some benevolent force is arranging things on your behalf like a cosmic butler, but because the world is nothing other than your assumptions pushed out into three-dimensional form. It cannot do anything else. It has no independent volition. It has no agenda of its own. It has no opinion about what you should or should not experience. The world you see is a mirror, and a mirror can only reflect the face that looks into it. Change the face, and the reflection must change. It has no choice in the matter. Persist in your assumption, and the world must rearrange itself to conform. This is not a suggestion. This is not one approach among many that you might try alongside affirmations, beside meditation, in addition to prayer. This is the way consciousness operates, and it operates this way for everyone, at all times, in all places, without exception, and without appeal. Now I know what you may be thinking. You may be thinking, if this is true, then why is my life not what I want it to be? If consciousness is the only reality and assumption is the bridge, then why am I struggling? Why am I sick? Why am I poor? Why am I lonely? Why has the world been so unkind to me? And the answer is so simple it may offend you, but I would rather offend you with the truth than comfort you with a lie. You are these things because you have assumed yourself to be these things. Not once, not as a passing thought that drifted through your mind and departed, but as a sustained, habitual, deeply felt assumption that has become so familiar you no longer recognize it as an assumption at all. You have confused it with fact. You have mistaken the reflection for the mirror. You look at your bank account and you say, I am poor. You look at your body and you say, I am sick. You look at your empty home and you say, I am alone. And each time you make that declaration, each time you inhabit that state, each time you accept that condition as your identity rather than your temporary experience, you are giving consciousness its instructions. You are telling the mirror what face to reflect, and the mirror obeys. It always obeys. It has never done anything else. It cannot do anything else. I tell you from my own experience, the moment I began to change my assumptions about myself and my world began to change. Not gradually, not halfway, not in some pale, partial fashion, but completely. When I assumed I was free, I became free. When I assumed I was heard, I was heard. When I assumed the door was open, the door opened. Not because I forced it open with my hands, but because an open door was the only possible reflection of a consciousness that assumed openness. The door had no choice. The world had no choice. And your world, whatever world you are currently inhabiting, has no choice either once you change the assumption that is creating it. Let me tell you about a woman I will call Margaret, because her story illustrates this principle with unusual clarity, and because I want you to see that this teaching is not reserved for the strong, the educated, or the spiritually advanced. Margaret came to one of my lectures in New York in the early months of winter. She was a thin, anxious woman who sat in the back row and did not speak to anyone before or after the lecture. She returned the following week, and the week after that, always sitting in the same seat, always leaving without a word. On her fourth visit, she approached me after the crowd had thinned and said, Mr. Goddard, I have been listening to everything you say, and I want to believe it, but my situation seems impossible. She told me that she had been living in a single room on the east side of the city, a room so small she could touch both walls with outstretched arms. She had not worked in nearly a year. She had a daughter who had stopped speaking to her 3 years earlier after a bitter argument about money, and she had a medical condition that 2 different doctors had told her would only worsen with time. She said to me, with a voice that trembled not from weakness but from the weight of genuine despair, how can I assume a new state when every fact in my life contradicts it? And I said to her, Margaret, the facts of your life are not causes, they are effects. They are the residue of yesterday's assumptions, the echoes of the states you have occupied in the past. If you change today's assumption, tomorrow's facts must change. They have no choice. I told her to do one thing, just one. I told her tonight, before you fall asleep, enter the state akin to sleep, that drowsy liminal condition between waking and sleeping, where the conscious mind loosens its grip and the deeper mind becomes receptive and pliable. And in that state, construct a simple scene that implies your desire is fulfilled. Feel yourself in a comfortable, warm home with room enough to breathe. Feel yourself opening a letter from your daughter, a letter of love and reconciliation. Feel the doctor telling you, with amazement in his voice, that the condition has reversed. Do not ask how these things will come about. Do not wonder when. Do not try to figure out the steps. Simply feel each scene as real, as present, as already accomplished, and then sleep in that feeling. Sleep as though the wish were fulfilled. Wake as though it is already so. She looked at me as though I had asked her to walk on water. But there was something in her eyes, something deeper than her doubt, a flicker of recognition, as though a part of her already knew what I was telling her was true, and she agreed to try. I did not see Margaret again for nearly 5 months. And then one evening she walked into my lecture hall, and I almost did not recognize her. She was fuller in the face, steadier in her step, and there was a calm about her, a settledness that had not been there before. After the lecture, she told me what had happened, and she told it simply, without embellishment, which made it all the more powerful. Within 3 weeks of beginning the practice, she had received an unexpected letter from a former employer, offering her part-time work that soon became full-time. Within 2 months, her daughter had called her, not to argue, not to make demands, but to apologize and to ask if they might begin again. And within 4 months, her doctor had told her, with obvious confusion and no small amount of professional discomfort, that the condition had not progressed and appeared, in fact, to be reversing. Margaret did not move mountains with her hands. She changed her consciousness, and the mountains moved themselves. Now you might hear Margaret's story and think it is an exception. You might think she was lucky, or that her circumstances were uniquely suited to this kind of change, or that I have selected one success and ignored 100 failures. But I have seen this pattern repeated hundreds of times, thousands of times, in different cities, in different decades, with different people facing vastly different challenges. The details change, the names change, the circumstances change, the principle never does. Consciousness is the only reality, and assumption is its creative instrument. What you desire, you already are in eternity. That is worth repeating, and I want you to let it penetrate past the surface of your mind and into the depths where real change occurs. What you desire, you already are in eternity. The gap between your desire and its fulfillment is not a gap in space or time. It is a gap in assumption. Close the gap, and the fulfillment appears. Not because it travels from some distant place to reach you, but because it was always here, always present, always real, waiting only for the shift in consciousness that would make it visible in the three-dimensional world. This is what I mean when I say you do not attract things into your life. You do not pull circumstances toward you from afar. You become the state from which those things are the natural and inevitable expression. A wealthy man does not attract wealth. He is the state of wealth, and wealth is the shadow that state casts in the physical world. A healthy man does not attract health. He is the state of health, and a functioning body is the shadow of that state made visible. And you, whatever you desire, you do not need to attract it, chase it, earn it, or prove yourself worthy of it. You need only assume the state from which it naturally flows, and then persist. Persist in that assumption with the quiet confidence of one who knows the law. Dare to assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, and watch what follows. But here is where I must take you deeper, because what I have told you so far, while entirely true, is only the surface of the teaching. And if you remain on the surface, you will use this principle the way most people use it, which is to say, poorly. Most people hear me say assumption creates reality, and they immediately begin trying to use it like a mechanical tool, like a lever or a switch. They say, very well, I will assume I am rich, and then I will become rich. And they sit down and they strain and they struggle, and they try to force themselves to feel wealthy, and nothing happens, and they come back to me frustrated and say, Neville, I tried it, and it does not work. And I say to them, of course it did not work. You were not assuming, you were pretending, and pretending and assuming are not the same thing. They are not even close to the same thing. Pretending is an act of the surface mind. It is a performance. It is wearing a costume. It is saying the words without inhabiting the state. You can tell yourself I am wealthy 1,000 times a day, and if the feeling behind those words is I am poor, then poverty is your assumption, and poverty is what will crystallize in your world. The words do not matter, the affirmations do not matter, the thoughts in isolation do not matter. What matters, the only thing that matters, is the feeling, the subjective experience, the lived sensation of being the person you want to be. Feeling is the secret. And when I say feeling, I do not mean emotion in the way most people understand emotion. I do not mean excitement. I do not mean enthusiasm. I do not mean the temporary high of forced positivity that fades the moment you open your eyes and look at your circumstances. I mean the deep, quiet, bone-level sense of reality, the feeling of being. Consider this. When you touch your face right now, you feel your face. You do not doubt it is there. You do not hope it is there. You do not try to believe it is there. You do not repeat an affirmation to convince yourself your face exists. You simply feel it, and the feeling carries absolute certainty. There is no gap between the feeling and the knowing. They are one and the same. That is the quality of feeling I am speaking of. When you can feel the wish fulfilled with that same naturalness, that same effortless certainty, that same casual, unremarkable knowing, then and only then have you truly assumed the state. And once you assume it at that depth, the world has no choice but to confirm it. The law is impersonal. It does not ask whether you deserve what you have assumed. It does not ask whether you have worked hard enough, suffered long enough, or prayed fervently enough. It does not ask whether you are a good person or a bad person, a saint or a sinner. It simply takes the assumption, whatever that assumption may be, and projects it onto the screen of your experience. This is why I say consciousness is the only reality, because everything else, everything you can see, touch, taste, hear, measure, or prove, is a projection. It is the movie on the screen, and consciousness is the projector. Change the film in the projector, and the movie on the screen must change. There is no other possibility. There has never been any other possibility. Now here is something that will disturb many of you, and I say it deliberately because the truth often disturbs before it liberates, and I would rather you be disturbed and free than comfortable and imprisoned. If consciousness is the only reality, and if assumption is the mechanism by which consciousness becomes fact, then there is no external power to blame for your condition. None. Not God as you have been taught to conceive of God, sitting on a distant throne dispensing rewards and punishments according to some inscrutable ledger. Not fate, not karma, not the economy, not your parents, not your childhood, not your government, not the alignment of stars, not the cruel hand of chance. None of these are causes, all of them are effects, all of them are projections on the screen, and you, awareness itself, are the projectionist. This is terrifying to the person who wants someone else to be responsible for their suffering. It is terrifying to the person who has built an identity upon victimhood, who has organized their entire life around the injustices done to them, who has made their suffering into a story that they tell themselves and others every single day. And I say this not to be cruel, but to be deeply, fundamentally, irreversibly liberating, because the same truth that tells you there is no one to blame also tells you there is no one whose permission you need. The same truth that removes your excuses also removes your chains. If you are the operant power, if consciousness is truly the only reality, then you do not need to wait for the world to change before you can be what you want to be. You do not need approval from any authority. You do not need circumstances to align like stars in a favorable constellation. You do not need luck. You do not need rescue. You need only change your assumption. That is all. That is everything. That is the whole of the teaching in a single sentence. Man's imagination is the only redemptive power in the world. Let me tell you about a man named Robert, because his story addresses a question I am asked more than any other, and that question is whether this principle applies to the physical body itself. Robert was a veteran of the war who came to my lectures in Los Angeles in the late 1950s. He was a quiet, serious man with a military bearing that he had never quite lost, and he had lost the use of his right hand due to nerve damage sustained during his service overseas. He had been told by 3 different military doctors that the damage was permanent, that the nerves had been severed beyond the body's capacity to repair, and that he should learn to live with the limitation and be grateful that the rest of him had come home intact. Robert listened to my teaching for several weeks without comment, absorbing it with the patience and discipline that his years of service had instilled in him. And then one evening, he came to me with a question that I will never forget. He said, "Neville, you say that consciousness is the only reality. Does that include the body? Does that include bone and nerve and muscle?" I said, "Robert, the body is consciousness made visible. Every cell of it is an assumption in physical form. It is not separate from consciousness. It is not outside the law. It is consciousness crystallized, and what has been crystallized can be recrystallized." He said, "Then I am going to assume my hand works." I said, "Do not assume your hand works. That is the wrong starting point. Assume you are a man whose hand has always worked. There is a difference, and it is a crucial one. If you assume your hand works, you are starting from the state of a man with a broken hand who is trying to fix it. You are still in the old state, reaching toward the new. But if you assume you are a man whose hand has always worked, you bypass the problem entirely. You do not fix the hand. You become the man who does not need fixing. Robert took this instruction with the seriousness of a soldier receiving orders on the eve of a campaign. Every night, in the state akin to sleep, he would imagine himself shaking hands with his closest friend, a man named Thomas. He would feel the grip. He would feel the pressure of Thomas's fingers against his own. He would feel the muscles in his palm contracting and releasing, the tendons pulling, the warmth of another man's hand in his. He did not strain. He did not try. He simply assumed the reality of the handshake and fell asleep in that assumption. He did this faithfully for 11 weeks. In the 4th week, he began to feel tingling in his fingers, a sensation he had not experienced in years. By the 7th week, he could curl them slightly, enough to hold a cup, not with the strength of before, but with unmistakable movement where there had been none. By the 11th week, he walked into my lecture hall, found me after the talk, and shook my hand. The grip, while not full, was firm and real and unmistakable. I felt his fingers close around mine. I felt the intention and the strength behind it. His doctors could not explain it. They ordered new tests. They consulted with specialists. They used words like spontaneous and anomalous and unprecedented. But Robert could explain it simply and completely. He had changed the assumption, and the body, which is nothing but consciousness crystallized into form, had no choice but to conform to the new assumption. And there is another story I must share with you, because it addresses the question of whether this principle works in matters of livelihood, of career, of one's place in the world of commerce and profession. A young man named David, a musician of considerable talent but no reputation, attended a series of my lectures in San Francisco. He played the piano beautifully, but he could not find work. He had auditioned for orchestras, for bands, for hotels, for anyone who would listen, and he had been rejected again and again. He came to me not with skepticism, but with desperation. He said, "Neville, I have talent. Everyone who hears me play tells me so, but no one will hire me. What am I doing wrong?" And I said, "David, you are doing nothing wrong with your hands. You are doing everything wrong with your consciousness. You are walking into every audition wearing the state of a rejected man. You are sitting at the piano clothed in the assumption that you will not be chosen. And the panel of judges, who are themselves projections of your consciousness, are merely confirming the assumption you have already made." He was quiet for a long moment, and then he said, "What do I do?" I told him to stop auditioning, not forever, but for now. I told him to go home, to sit at his piano, and to play, not for any audience, not for any panel, but for himself, as the man he wished to be. I told him to enter the state akin to sleep each night, and to construct a single, vivid scene. Imagine that he is sitting backstage after a performance, and a man he respects, a conductor, a fellow musician, comes to him and says, "That was magnificent, David." I told him to feel the handshake, the warmth in the voice, the sense of having arrived, of belonging, of being recognized not as a man who is trying to break in, but as a man who has always been where he belongs. David did this for 6 weeks. He told me later that the first 2 weeks were the hardest, because his rational mind kept screaming at him that he was wasting time, that he should be sending letters and making phone calls and pounding on doors. But he persisted. And in the 3rd week, without any action on his part, without sending a single letter or making a single call, he received a telephone message from a woman he had met briefly at a party months earlier. She told him that a small ensemble she was connected with had lost their pianist unexpectedly and asked if he would be willing to step in for a weekend engagement. He stepped in. The weekend engagement became a monthly engagement. The monthly engagement became a permanent position, and within a year, David was performing regularly and supporting himself entirely through his music. He had not changed his skill. He had not improved his technique. He had changed his state. He had moved from the consciousness of a rejected man to the consciousness of a man who belongs, and the world, which is nothing but consciousness pushed out, rearranged itself accordingly. Now I want you to understand something crucial about the nature of time as it relates to consciousness, because this is where most people lose their footing and fall back into the old way of seeing. You live, or rather you believe you live, in a world of linear time. Past, present, future, strung out like beads on a wire, moving in one direction only, from yesterday through today and into tomorrow. You believe the past is gone, irrevocably, the future has not yet arrived, and the present is the only moment that is real. But I tell you that from the perspective of consciousness, all moments exist now. The past is a state of consciousness. The future is a state of consciousness. And the present is simply the state you are currently occupying, the station you are currently tuned to on a radio that receives all stations simultaneously. When you remember the past, you are not traveling backward through time. You are entering a state of consciousness that corresponds to what you call the past. And when you imagine the future, you are not projecting forward through time. You are entering a state of consciousness that corresponds to what you call the future. Both are equally real. Both exist now, and you can enter either one at will. This is why the technique of revision is so extraordinarily powerful, and why I teach it alongside the imaginal act itself. Revision is the act of reimagining a past event as you wish it had occurred. You take a memory, an unpleasant memory, a failure, an embarrassment, a loss, a cruel word spoken to you or by you, and you enter the state akin to sleep, and you relive that event differently. You reimagine it. You reconstruct it. You feel it happening as you wish it had happened. The argument ends in reconciliation. The failure becomes a success. The rejection becomes an embrace, and something extraordinary occurs. The consequences of that original event begin to change in the present, not the memory in your mind, but the effects in your world. The ripples that flowed from that event begin to rearrange themselves. People who were affected by the original event begin to behave differently toward you. Circumstances that were set in motion by that event begin to shift in unexpected ways. It is as though you reached into the stream of time and redirected its flow at the source. And you did, because time is not a stream flowing in one direction. Time is a landscape, and consciousness is the traveler who moves through it freely. Change the point at which you stand in that landscape, and the view in every direction changes. This is also why I teach the practice of living in the end, and I want to make sure you understand this practice with complete clarity, because it is perhaps the most practical aspect of everything I am sharing with you tonight. When you desire something, do not imagine yourself wanting it. Do not imagine yourself working toward it. Do not imagine yourself hoping for it, planning for it, striving for it. These are all states of not having, and if you occupy the state of not having, the world must reflect not having back to you. Instead, imagine yourself having it. Go to the end. Go to the moment after the desire is fulfilled, to the quiet satisfaction that follows accomplishment, to the peaceful certainty of possession. Feel what you would feel, see what you would see, hear what you would hear, if the thing you desire were already an accomplished fact, as natural and unremarkable as the shoes on your feet. Live there, dwell there, make that state your home, and from that state, look back at the present, and you will find that the present begins to rearrange itself to become a path to that end. This is what I call the bridge of incidents. You do not need to plan the how. You do not need to figure out the steps. You do not need to map the route from here to there. You need only occupy the end, firmly and faithfully, and the bridge will build itself beneath your feet, incident by incident, step by step, in an order you could never have predicted, and through means you could never have arranged. The most important conversation you will ever have is the one you hold with yourself. And that conversation, that inner dialogue, that ceaseless stream of assumptions and declarations and feelings that runs through your awareness every moment of every day, that is the conversation that is building your world. Not your conversations with other people, not your conversations with God, not your prayers, your conversation with yourself. What are you telling yourself right now about who you are, about what you deserve, about what is possible and impossible for you? Whatever you are telling yourself, that is your assumption, and that assumption is, at this very moment, hardening into fact. Now I want you to try something with me. Right now, wherever you are, whatever you are doing, I want you to close your eyes for a moment, just for a moment, and I want you to feel the chair beneath you, or the bed, or the floor, or the seat of your car. Feel the solidity of it. Feel the weight of your body pressing downward. Feel the temperature of the air on your skin, cool or warm. Feel the texture of your clothing against your body. Feel the reality of this moment with all the vividness you can summon. You are here. You are now. You are aware. That much is undeniable. Good. Now, with your eyes still closed, I want you to imagine that you are somewhere else entirely. Not as a fantasy, not as a daydream that drifts through your mind like smoke and dissolves just as quickly, but as a felt reality, a reality you inhabit with your whole being. I want you to imagine that you are standing in the doorway of a home that represents everything you have ever wanted your life to feel like. Maybe it is a specific house you have seen and coveted. Maybe it is not a house at all, but a feeling of belonging, of arrival, of having finally come home to yourself. I want you to feel the doorframe under your hand. Feel the texture of it, the wood grain or the cool metal, the slight roughness of paint or the smoothness of varnish. Feel the floor beneath your feet change as you step inside, from the hardness of a porch to the warmth of carpet or the cool smoothness of tile. Hear the sounds of this home around you, the creak of the house settling into itself, the hum of a refrigerator in a distant kitchen, the tick of a clock on a mantle, the distant sound of a voice you love, a voice that fills you with peace and belonging, calling your name from another room. Feel the peace of it, feel the rightness of it, feel the deep, bone-level certainty that this is yours, not that it will be yours, not that you hope it will be yours someday. That it is yours right now, already, completely, undeniably, irreversibly yours. Hold that feeling. Breathe into it. Let it fill your chest, your throat, your fingertips. Let it settle into your body like warm water into dry earth. Let it become more real than the chair you are sitting in. Let it become more vivid than the room around you. Let it become the only reality, because in truth, it is. In this moment, if you have truly entered the feeling, if you have truly surrendered to it, you have changed your assumption. You have stepped into a new state, and that state, if you return to it, if you persist in it, if you fall asleep in it tonight and carry it with you tomorrow, must crystallize into physical form. This is not magic. This is not wishing. This is law, and the law does not fail. Now I want to address something that I know many of you struggle with, because it is the most common objection I hear, and it is a reasonable and honest one. People say to me, Neville, I can assume a new state for a few minutes during the imaginal act, but then the old world comes crashing back in the moment I open my eyes. I look around and I see the same small apartment, the same pile of bills, the same aching body, the same empty chair where someone I loved used to sit. How do I maintain the new assumption when the old reality is screaming the opposite at me from every direction? And here is my answer, and I want you to hear it clearly because it contains one of the most important distinctions in the entire teaching. The world you see when you open your eyes is not reality screaming at you. It is yesterday's assumption echoing. It is the residue. It is the old film still playing on the screen because you have only just begun to change the reel. The image on the screen does not change the instant you change the film in the projector. There is a delay, a lag, a period during which the old image persists even though the new film is already loaded and running. And what you must do, what I am asking you to do, what I am daring you to do, is to become disciplined in your inner life, the way an athlete is disciplined in the training of their body. You must return to the new assumption again and again and again, not with effort, not with strain, not with clenched fists and gritted teeth and desperate willpower, but with the calm, quiet persistence of a man who knows the truth and refuses to be intimidated by shadows on a wall. When you see the old condition, do not deny it, do not fight it, do not pretend it is not there. Simply say to yourself, quietly, inwardly, I remember when that was true. I remember when I lived in that apartment. I remember when I had that condition. I remember when that was my life. And in saying I remember when, you have done something profound. You have placed that condition in the past tense. You have assumed it is already behind you. You have moved your consciousness forward into the new state, and the old world, the old echo, must eventually fall silent because it has no power of its own. It never did. It never could. It was always, only always, a reflection. Let me give you a practical method for this daily persistence, because I do not want to leave you with theory when I can give you tools. There are 3 practices I want you to carry with you from tonight forward. The first is the imaginal act in the state akin to sleep, which I have already described. This is your primary practice. Every night, without exception, you enter that drowsy state and you feel the wish fulfilled. You construct a short, specific scene that implies your desire has already been accomplished, and you loop that scene, feeling it again and again until you fall asleep within it. The scene should be brief, no longer than a few seconds of action, but it must be vivid, it must be felt from within, not observed from without, and it must imply fulfillment, not the process of getting there. The second practice is revision, which I have described in relation to time. At the end of each day, before you enter your imaginal act, take a few minutes to review the day. If anything happened that you did not like, any conversation that went poorly, any event that seemed to move against your desire, revise it. Replay it in your imagination as you wish it had gone. Feel the revised version as real. This is not denial. This is not pretending the original event did not happen. This is an exercise of your creative power, your authority as the operant power, to reshape the substance of your experience at its causal level, which is consciousness. Over time, revision becomes second nature, and you will find that fewer and fewer events require revising, because your dominant assumption is producing a world that increasingly conforms to your desires. The third practice is the one I have already mentioned, the I remember when technique, and I want you to understand why it is so effective. When you say, I remember when I was poor, you are not lying. You are speaking from a future state, a state in which poverty is a memory rather than a present condition. You are, in that single phrase, relocating your consciousness from the unwanted state to the desired state. You are telling yourself, and therefore telling your world, that the old condition is finished, past, done. And every time you do this, you strengthen the new assumption and weaken the old one. It is the gentlest, most natural form of assumption I know, and it can be practiced anywhere, at any time, in any circumstance, without anyone around you knowing what you are doing. You are having the most important conversation you will ever have, and you are having it silently, invisibly, in the sanctuary of your own awareness. There are subtler dimensions of this teaching that I want to share with you now. Because if you are going to truly master the law of assumption, if you are going to move beyond using it occasionally and begin living from it continually, you must understand not only how to create, but how creation itself is structured at its deepest level. Everything in the physical world exists first as a state of consciousness. Before the house was built, it was imagined. Before the symphony was composed, it was heard in the inner ear of the composer. Before the child was born, it was desired, felt, assumed into being. This is the fourth dimension I speak of. The 4D, the fourth dimension, is not time as your physicists conceive of it, not a mathematical coordinate to be plotted on a graph. The fourth dimension is consciousness itself, the dimension from which all three-dimensional reality is projected into form. Your physical world, with its length, width, and height, is a cross-section of a higher dimensional reality, a single frame from an infinite film, and that higher dimensional reality is your imagination. When you imagine something, you are not making it up. You are not fabricating a fantasy from nothing. You are perceiving a reality that already exists in the fourth dimension, a reality as real and as solid and as permanent as anything you can touch with your physical hands. The difference is that it has not yet been projected into the three-dimensional plane. It has not yet crystallized into the world of appearances. And the act of assumption, the act of feeling the wish fulfilled with naturalness and certainty, is the act by which you cause that projection. You are quite literally a fourth-dimensional being having a three-dimensional experience. And the tragedy of most human lives is that they have forgotten their true nature. They have become so hypnotized by the three-dimensional projection, so entranced by the movie on the screen, that they have forgotten they are the ones sitting in the projection booth, running the machine. This is the sleep I speak of when I say you must awaken, not physical sleep, spiritual sleep, the deep, dreamless sleep of the being who As forgotten it is God, because that is the final secret, the one that makes all the other secrets possible, the keystone that holds the entire arch in place. You, awareness, I am, the consciousness hearing these words right now, you are God. Not a God, not part of God, not a spark of God, not a fragment or a shard or an emanation of God. God, in your fullness and your totality, playing the role of a human being, dreaming a human life, projecting a human world. And the moment you remember this, the moment you stop begging God for things and start knowing yourself as the power that grants all things, everything changes. Now let me speak to those of you who have been testing this principle and have encountered what appears to be failure, because I know you are listening and I know your frustration is real. You assumed a new state. You felt it real, or you believed you felt it real. You persisted, or you believed you persisted, and nothing happened. Or worse, the opposite happened. Your condition deteriorated, your problems multiplied. The very thing you feared most seemed to rush toward you with renewed intensity, and you are tempted, perhaps strongly tempted, to say this does not work. I want to tell you two things, and I want you to consider both of them with the honesty and the courage that this teaching demands. First, there is a bridge of incidents between the assumption and its fulfillment, and that bridge does not always look the way you expect it to look. Sometimes the bridge involves what appear to be setbacks. Sometimes the bridge involves doors closing, sometimes slamming shut, so that other doors, the right doors, can open. Sometimes the bridge involves confusion, uncertainty, temporary chaos, and even apparent loss, because the old order is dissolving to make way for the new order, and dissolution always precedes reconstruction. A building must be demolished before a new building can rise on the same ground. Do not judge the bridge while you are standing in the middle of it. Do not mistake the middle of the story for the end. If you have truly assumed the new state, if you have truly felt it as real, if you have truly persisted in it with the quiet certainty I have described, then the fulfillment is inevitable. It is law. It is as certain as the sunrise. The only question is timing, and timing is something you must surrender because you do not see the full picture from your three-dimensional vantage point. You see only the cross-section. You see only the single frame. The fourth-dimensional reality, the reality in which your assumption already exists as fulfilled, as accomplished, as done, is arranging events and incidents in an order that your three-dimensional mind cannot predict and should not try to manage. Trust the assumption, trust the law, and persist. Second, and this requires the deepest honesty with yourself, examine carefully whether you have truly assumed the new state, or whether you have been oscillating between the old and the new like a pendulum that cannot decide where to rest. Most people who tell me the law did not work, upon truly honest self-examination, will admit that they assumed the new state for a few minutes at bedtime and then spent the remaining 23 hours and 50 minutes of the day assuming the old state. They imagined wealth in the state akin to sleep and then woke up in the morning and spent the entire day thinking like a poor person, acting like a poor person, speaking like a poor person, feeling like a poor person. And then they wondered why poverty persisted. The law is not a technique you perform for 5 minutes before sleep, like brushing your teeth. It is a state you inhabit throughout your waking life. Living in the end means living there. Not visiting there, living there. It means that when you catch yourself slipping back into the old state, and you will catch yourself many times, especially at first, you gently, without self-condemnation, without frustration, without declaring that the law has failed, return to the new state. It means that the new assumption becomes your resting place, your default, your home base, the state to which your mind naturally returns the way water naturally returns to level. It means that the old state becomes the foreign country and the new state becomes the native land. And this takes practice. It takes patience with yourself. It takes the kind of gentle, persistent, compassionate self-awareness that most people have never been taught to cultivate because the world has taught them to monitor their outer circumstances and neglect their inner states entirely. But this inner vigilance, this quiet governance of your own consciousness, is the most important skill you will ever develop because it is the skill by which you shape your entire world. I want to return now to where we began, because the ending must always illuminate the beginning, and the circle must close for the teaching to be complete. I told you at the start of our time together that you have been told a lie. That the world outside you is the primary reality, the solid ground, the unquestionable given, and that you, consciousness, awareness, imagination, are secondary, accidental, derivative, a mere epiphenomenon of matter and chemistry and blind mechanical forces. I told you this was precisely inverted from the truth. I told you that consciousness is the only reality, that the physical world is its shadow, its reflection, its crystallization of assumption. And now, having walked with me through the teaching, having heard the stories of Margaret and Robert, having felt the principle working in your own imagination during our exercise together, I want you to ask yourself one honest question. Does the lie still feel true? When you closed your eyes and felt that doorframe under your hand, when you heard that voice calling your name in a home that does not yet exist in the physical world, and it came alive, vivid and warm and real beneath your awareness, did it feel secondary? Did it feel like a mere brain event, a chemical accident, an illusion to be dismissed? Or did it feel like what it was, which is consciousness in its creative act, the projector projecting, the cause producing its effect? When Margaret received the letter from her daughter, when Robert shook my hand with a grip his doctors said was impossible, were those events produced by a dead, mechanical, unconscious universe that randomly and accidentally rearranged itself in their favor through sheer coincidence? Or were those events the inevitable, lawful, inescapable outpicturing of a consciousness that had changed its assumption and refused to look back? You know the answer. You have always known it. The lie was never truly convincing. It was only loud. It was only repeated. It was only shouted from so many pulpits and lecterns and laboratories that you mistook volume for truth. But tonight, you have heard the truth stated with equal force, and the truth, once truly heard, does not need to be repeated. It does not need to be shouted. It does not need to be defended. It simply is. Consciousness is the only reality. It always has been. It is the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, the cause and the effect, the dreamer and the dream. And the moment you accept this, not as a belief you hold alongside other beliefs, not as a spiritual opinion you entertain on weekends, but as the operative, functional, governing fact of your entire existence, you step out of the prison of circumstance and into the freedom that has always been yours, the freedom that was never taken from you, the freedom you merely forgot you possessed. So tonight, when you lay your head upon your pillow, I ask you to do one thing. Do not beg, do not hope, do not wish upon a star. Do not pray to some external power that sits beyond the clouds, waiting to be pleased or appeased. Instead, close your eyes, relax your body completely, enter that blessed state akin to sleep where the noise of the world recedes and only pure awareness remains, and assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Whatever it is you desire, feel it as already real, already present, already yours, already as natural and unremarkable as the beating of your heart. Feel the naturalness of it. Feel the quiet certainty of it. Feel the deep satisfaction of a desire that is not pursued but possessed, not chased but inhabited. And then sleep in that assumption. Let it be the last feeling of the day, the atmosphere in which you surrender to sleep, the state in which your deeper mind receives its instructions for tomorrow. And when you wake in the morning, carry it with you into the day, not as effort, not as strain, not as something you must remember to do, but as the quiet, unshakable knowing of one who has seen through the lie and remembers the truth. Do this tonight. Do this tomorrow night. Do this every night until the assumption hardens into undeniable, visible, touchable fact in your three-dimensional world, and it will harden into fact. It must, because it is law. And the law does not fail, has never failed, and cannot fail, because consciousness is the only reality, and what you assume within it, you must experience without it. I do not ask you to believe me. Belief is too weak a word for what I am offering you. I ask you to test me. Take this principle into the laboratory of your own life. Apply it to your own desires, your own challenges, your own seemingly impossible situations. And let the results speak for themselves. When they do, and they will, remember that you did not discover a new power. You remembered an old one, the oldest one, the only one. You are imagination, and imagination creates reality. Go now, go into the silence of your own awareness, and create wisely.